All right, looks like we're live on hopefully everywhere. I'm the real underscore G Warner. This is going to be an episode on the NCAA tournament and the bracket that was released yesterday. Thank you for watching, whether you're on StreamYard, Twitter, YouTube, or Instagram. Feel free to hit the follow button because you'll get a lot more content. Hoping to do something each day this week before everything gets going. And I figured today I'd go through the bracket. I'll do lines maybe at the end, but wanted to get through just kind of some strategy because a lot of what you want to do when you're picking a bracket is get the champion right. And a lot of times you want to pick a champion that not a lot of people are going to pick, which is sometimes hard to do because especially this year, it looks like there are two clear contestants or possibilities for the champion. And that looks like Gonzaga and Arizona to me. But I'm going to start and I'm going to go by, I guess, for each of the games in each of the regions. I'll start with Gonzaga since they were number one. So Gonzaga hosts Georgia, or I guess there's no host here, but Gonzaga, Georgia State is a pretty important game. And it's really going to be where Gonzaga gets going. Pardon me while I'm doing this. I'm trying to figure out where these games are, which, of course, the NCAA bracket, which does not show, but it does make sure to say don't bet on it, literally on the printable sheet, of course. But anyway, don't think location is going to matter a lot for Gonzaga. I think this one's in Portland. But Georgia State are a pretty good team that really underachieved a lot of the season, but ultimately got healthy. I think they had a big COVID issue, but and missed a lot of guys for a lot of games. And that's partly why they were so poorly seeded in their tournament. But cream rose to the top and they got there. But so yeah, the ESPN bracket does have it good. Okay, so in Portland. So Gonzaga should get through here pretty easily. And a big part of when I do my brackets is I try to figure out where are stumbling blocks or where can people trip up or where can teams trip up? Because you really don't want to have your pick to win the championship or make the Final Four that has to go through a lot of tough games. Now, a lot of these teams will get the higher seeds, the 1, 2s, 3s, even 4s have a relatively easy first matchup. I think from 5 and lower, you're getting challenged each round unless you got someone who's really been leaking oil for a while. Like if Xavier had gotten into this tournament, they were going to be a team I wanted to be against. But that's not really going to be a possibility because they're in the NIT. So Gonzaga is going to move through unless we get a second 16 seed to ever win. I don't think Georgia State are the one to do that. Boise State then plays Memphis in a matchup that should be pretty competitive. I think Boise really wants to play slowly, and they have – well, I guess the problem with Boise is they don't shoot very well. They've shot a little bit better this year, and that's how they won the Mountain West and the Mountain West tournament. But ultimately – they generally succeed on being more athletic than the teams they're playing against in the Mountain West, and that is the opposite. They're going to be the unathletic team here in this one against Memphis. So I don't really like that matchup, and I got to say I'm probably going to pick Memphis despite being the 9 seed. Not that it really matters, but Memphis I think is a favorite, so that should happen. I'm also playing a little hurt as I've been dealing with back spasms. Went to Vegas and was in agony, so trying to get through this for you, the people. Next in Buffalo, we have Connecticut against New Mexico State. New Mexico State is a good program coming from the WAC. They have a really good transfer in Teddy Allen of, I think, West Virginia fame previously. He's a good player. Connecticut is not a team I really like, but they are very tough inside, and they're going to push New Mexico State around, I think, on the interior. And that's going to be really hard for a 12 seed to cope with. I don't think Connecticut's three-point shooting is anything to write home about, and that's going to limit them and probably prevent them from going too far in this tournament. I don't think it really will bother them here, however. Arkansas, also in Buffalo, is against Vermont. Vermont's a good team, but they've really shown against high major competition. They haven't really been very successful. I'm not sure they've won a game since Rhode Island or famous Rhode Islander James Sorrentine or whatever TJ Sorrentine, hit a 3-pointer to knock out Syracuse way back when from the parking lot, as Gus Johnson called it. I think Arkansas is a good team that is not great, but I don't think Vermont has any sort of ability to stay with them athletically, and that's a big problem for a lot of these double-digit seeds that are playing the top of the bracket. Moving next to Alabama, who will then host, I think, the winner of Rutgers and Notre Dame, or not host, but they're playing them in San Diego. Fresh off a quick turnaround from the first four. Alabama's a tough team to talk about this season because they pretty much go as their three-point shooting goes. They shoot a lot of them. They don't make a lot of them, but when they do, they can beat anybody, as they've shown with some of the best wins in this tournament, really. But then some puzzling losses and losing to a lot of teams that they don't shoot well. I don't know that Rutgers or Notre Dame are really the teams that can cause that problem. But ultimately, Notre Dame's going to shoot a bunch of threes as well. So that has a bit of a could go either way type of idea or type of possible result. And you certainly don't want that if you're taking Alabama to win a few games that they might go out in the first round. If Rutgers wins, I think that they're going to be playing as much defense as they can against Alabama. And I don't know if that really works in this tournament. Texas Tech, and then also in San Diego, will be against Montana State. Montana State's pretty good. Got to say they were a lot better than I think a lot of people expected. And I think the Big Sky that they won that tournament. But Texas Tech, they're a really good team. They've beaten a lot of really good teams. I don't think that Montana State will cause any problems there. In Greenville, South Carolina, we have Michigan State and Davidson. Funny story with Davidson's point guard being a transfer, Foster Loyer from Michigan State. This is not a good Michigan State team. They turn the ball over a ton. They're athletic, I guess, for the Big Ten, but the Big Ten's not really ever a very athletic league. The nice part for Michigan State is they're going to be really, really athletic compared to Davidson. Davidson being a 10 seed, not winning that A10 tournament as a pretty big favorite was a big surprise to me. I thought they might not even get in the tournament. I'm not sure they really deserve to be in it, but they're certainly a team I want to go against. Michigan State is not exactly a prom queen, to say the least, but I think they can get through Davidson with athleticism, and Davidson's never been a defense that's going to force a lot of turnovers. So that's pretty good draw if you could ask for one as a 7th seed for Michigan State. The 2 seed Duke, really overseeded, as a lot of people have talked about. They get Cal State Fullerton. I don't see any upset risk there, but I guess I'll just keep going, staying in the West bracket. So Duke, that we just covered, should get through Fullerton pretty easily. I think they'll beat Michigan State as well. Another really kind of poor team and a really nice draw for Duke. Say what you want, all the Duke haters out there. I might have been one of them at one point in my life, but it's pretty crazy what Coach K is getting in his last season. I don't know that Michigan State caused a lot of problems to Duke. Izzo has never had any success really against Coach K. And there is some possibility that Michigan State could lose that first round game to Davidson, because they can really lose to anybody. But I don't really know. I think they do beat Davidson, and I think Duke will move on to the next one. Texas Tech will then host the winner of Alabama Notre Dame potentially, or Alabama Rutgers. Alabama most likely to get through that matchup, but I don't know. I think Notre Dame might be the potential 11 seed that makes a little bit of a run after winning a first 4 game. Alabama will be tough and will make it tough on Texas Tech as well. I think they're going to need a lot of 3-pointers to advance. And I just don't know that any of that pod of teams, the potential of Rutgers, Notre Dame, or Alabama, can really do too much to Texas Tech, who I think is a really good team and is going to give Duke a lot of trouble. So that game will be in San Diego. I guess the first set of games will all be in San Diego. So Texas Tech won't even have to leave if they keep winning. So that's kind of nice. But Texas Tech and Duke in the Sweet 16 matchup should be a really good one if chalk holds there. I think Duke can cause a lot of problems for teams based on athleticism, but Texas Tech causes more problems with the way they play defense. It feels to me that Mark Adams was a big factor behind the success of Chris Beard. That team has not missed a beat since Chris Beard went down to Austin. So I think the biggest question is how they guard Paolo Banchero, who's definitely going to be a question mark there. I think, and this is where you get into bracket strategy. I feel like Duke is going to be on a lot of people's pick lists, which makes me not want to take them if they do match up with Texas Tech. But part of a theory that I have is based on if you play a team that really can put you in jeopardy sooner, You don't want to keep having to do that round after round after round. And I don't think that Duke will have a lot of problems with Michigan State or Davidson, depending on whoever gets through, and will be a pretty sizable favorite against both of them. I think Texas Tech could struggle with Alabama just based on their nature of being able to beat the best teams in this tournament, and who are already seated high in this bracket. So I think for that reason, I'll take Duke to move on, but probably if they played in real life, be looking to bet Texas Tech. And so that would get Duke through all the way to the Elite Eight. And so I'll go to the top end of that bracket. Arkansas, I think, will get through along with UConn. You'll notice I'm not really, I feel like unless you're in a pool that rewards the seeds for each victory, which changes things completely. But most pools or brackets or whatever, they go with 1 point per round, or it escalates as you go through the tournament, where the champion's the most important. If the champion is not the most important, then there is some value in taking upsets or in going for teams. If you get 13 points for Vermont winning this game, then that might be a little bit more worth it than it would be taking them for just 1 point, for example. So I'm going with, based on the strategy that it's 1 point first round, 2 point second round, 4 point third, 8, 16, 32 for the champion. And I think that you'll see Arkansas, Connecticut pretty comfortably in the second round, and that'll be a good matchup. But Arkansas, I feel like, is fairly limited, and I don't know how they're going to guard inside. I mean, they probably will have to double Sonogo in the interior, and that doesn't look good to me. Jalen Williams is a great player, and will certainly be able to punish Sonogo on the outside or on the perimeter, because Sonogo is an interior player. But I feel like that's a big enough concern for me, and I don't know that either of the double-digit seeds will put up too much of a challenge in this first round. So I think UConn is who I would pick to get through Arkansas. I don't see a big difference between the two teams, and I think most people want to take the lower seed. So UConn would be of interest to me. Gonzaga would then face Memphis based on this bracket I'm filling out. And Memphis's athleticism is a nice thing, but I don't think it would compare or do enough for them against Gonzaga, who does have some athleticism questions for sure. But I think Gonzaga's too strong, and I'm not 100% sure that Memphis would get through Boise. So I'll take Gonzaga to get through that one, and I'll also take them to get through Connecticut as well, because I do think that they'll be able to guard Sonogo inside and will be able to score a ton of points that I don't think Connecticut will be able to keep up with. I mean, maybe the Connecticut defense plays really well. I just don't see either of those teams really challenging them, and that makes me want to take Gonzaga going a long way if their first challenge is going to be in the Elite Eight against Duke or potentially Texas Tech. And I'll pick Gonzaga to win in the rematch after they lost to Duke in Vegas the first time as a pretty big favorite. Imagine they'll be a favorite there again. And I think based on not being challenged really like Duke will be, that makes me want to take Gonzaga a lot. And then that'll get the West. So put Gonzaga through as a 1 seed. I know not really going out on a limb there, but they are the 1 overall seed, and they do win a ton of games because they score a ton of points. I just don't know that they're going to get challenged until really the Elite Eight. Moving to Fort Worth, this is the East bracket. Baylor against Norfolk State. Baylor should get through that one, though they are a team I want to go against because they have not looked the same and have been dealing with a ton of injuries. Really, I don't agree with them being a 1 seed, but probably got in there because there weren't many other choices. Next, UNC and Marquette. Marquette has not been playing well down the stretch, was really puzzled by their loss to Creighton in the Big East tournament, and things haven't gone very well for them down the stretch, really. So where UNC had to kind of play themselves into this tournament, kind of surprised that they got to an 8 seed, but a couple good wins in there, I guess, were enough. And maybe because Virginia Tech won the ACC, that loss looks a lot better or something like that. Marquette is going to want to press. UNC has good ball handling, point guards, which is certainly going to be, well, they do have decent point guards and a few of them who can handle the ball, but ultimately the Shaka Smart press works in this tournament. It works all the time. He just doesn't use it very often. And so we'll see what happens. But I think based on quality and talent of the rosters, UNC has got a pretty big gap between them and Marquette. Moving to Portland, Oregon for St. Mary's, who will be facing the winner of Wyoming and Indiana. St. Mary's is a 5. I don't know where that comes from, I got to say. They're a tall team inside that are really physical, but their scoring is a big question. They want to play a 52-50 game, which is never good against inferior competition. And I'm not sure that Indiana is much worse, I got to say, if Indiana gets through. Or if Wyoming gets through, they want to play that snail's pace as well. So they'll be wanting to play that game right away. And who knows, maybe they can force Graham Ike out from the interior, but Randy Bennett will have to have some good double team plans for Maldonado on the block as well, because no one in the St. Mary's backcourt, I don't think, can really mess with them. I mean, unless they're going to go Maldonado with a huge size advantage with Johnson covering him. But ultimately, I'm not really that confident in St. Mary's, and I think most people will take them to win that first game. There's some magic in a first four team that has to get a win in the tournament. So I'm pretty interested in that. Whoever comes out of that Indiana Wyoming game, I think I'll probably expect to be Indiana, and they've been playing well lately, but we'll end up seeing UCLA hosting against Akron in Portland. I keep seeing the top team, bottom team, home team, whatever. Anyway, UCLA's playing great. A lot of questions about them trying to repeat what really they did last season, which was a big surprise, coming from the first four and making the deep tournament run that they did. They're looking really deep. Mick Cronin can coach. We know that. There's been some questions about him at Cincinnati for sure, and him getting the UCLA job as like the fifth choice was never good. But they're very deep. They went on a big run last year, and I feel like they've looked very competitive with good teams like Arizona, and I'm still a big believer in USC. So went to that game at the Pac-12 semifinals in Vegas on Friday night, and UCLA was better for the second of three games against USC, and that was impressive to me. Had a fairly big lead against Arizona in the championship and couldn't hold on. I don't know that Akron, who had a good run, I picked them to win the MAC tournament in the pool I was in, so I was happy to see them do that. But I'm not sure that they're really on the same level as UCLA, and that's going to be a tough one for them. Next, Texas and Virginia Tech. I'm a Texas alum, and been really disappointed. I mean, blowing a 20-point lead to TCU, who's one of the worst teams in this tournament, which I'll get to later. I don't know, 6th seed. I mean, based on preseason expectations, that's the only reason I think Texas is in this tournament, because they're supposed to be a top 10 team. Certainly they did fairly well in the Big 12, but I'm very disappointed. And Virginia Tech are about as hot as you can get. I'm not sure who's hotter than Hunter Couture at this point. They went on a big run as a 7th seed in the ACC tournament, won 4 games in 4 days, I think. And that kept me off backing them in the championship against Duke. Unfortunately, I was a little worried about their legs, but they showed up, they showed out, and I expect them to give Texas a ton of problems because they can score. And Texas really, it seems like Courtney Ramey is the only real 3-point option that you can trust. I mean, Jace Febres can come in and light it up from time to time, but he's never available, it seems. And there's a lot of questions about Texas as well on the interior. Their athletic big and Trey Mitchell left the team essentially, and they have no really talented scoring option to replace him. And Christian Bishop, I think, is going to really struggle with Keve Aluma. So I'm pretty interested in Virginia Tech moving on. And I don't think a lot of people are going to be taking them, especially in my pools with a lot of Texas alums as well. Speaking of, if you have pools, feel free to invite me, _G Warner on Twitter, or wherever you see this, comment somewhere. I'd love to play and donate to whoever wins. Next, Purdue and Yale. These are games all in Milwaukee. Purdue has something that no one else has, and that is a 7'4" center, and Zach Edey, who can score, is a monster, and I don't know how you defend him. Yale, they're a good team, but I don't really see them giving a huge fight to Purdue, though. Purdue has had some pretty bad early exits in NCAA tournaments, and it does worry me about trying to push them along further. I just don't know that Yale can really compete with them unless Purdue has a really bad night, which is certainly possible, but I just don't think that they have, like Chris Beard did at Little Rock by throwing a ton of pressure at a Purdue backcourt that wasn't very good. I don't think that Yale really has that type of thing they can turn on or press a button and all of a sudden play really well. Murray State then hosting, or I guess against San Francisco and Indianapolis in a game that's pretty close to Murray, Kentucky. It's at least a lot closer than San Francisco in the Bay Area. San Fran is a good team. They have good point guards, or two of them basically that run together. And I imagine that Shabazz will be all over the best player for Murray, whose name's escaping me right now, who Trayvon Terrell Smith, something like that. Anyway, that's going to be a huge matchup and probably determines who wins this game. I'm really surprised that San Francisco as a 10 seed was favorites last night. And I will be likely betting Murray because I think that they can potentially make the Sweet 16. as we move to the next one, which is Kentucky against St. Peter's. I think Kentucky should win handily in that one. And that probably would mean why I would take Kentucky to make the Sweet 16. But I don't think, or I guess if we do get a Murray-Kentucky matchup in Indianapolis, should be a million Cats fans for sure. But Murray will be there. And I got to say, everyone who's not rooting for Kentucky is rooting against them. And Murray is an underdog there is very interesting to me. So I'll probably take Kentucky to move on in my bracket just because I don't think there's enough value unless you're getting a Murray 7 points for winning each game they take, or like doubling their seed, even if we're winning a second round game. I just don't know that there's enough there for me. But certainly be looking to back Murray against the spread against Kentucky, and really backing Murray until they get knocked out of this tournament, I think. Purdue and Virginia Tech or Texas winner. I think that's a pretty big toss up, but the Texas Virginia Tech matchup. But I think that Purdue, their height, neither of these teams can really deal with that. I mean, I guess what Virginia Tech will want to do is try to get Zach Edey out on the perimeter with Kevin Aluma. I don't know, because you can probably put Edey on Justin Mutz and try to force him to try to take him to the basket or shoot from the outside, and he's not really a good shooter. So, and I think based on that first matchup being a pretty big toss-up, in my opinion, I think you got to take Purdue here to move on. But we'll be looking at Texas or Virginia Tech against the spread just to really see what type of number comes out, because I think Purdue is a good team, but they might have a tough road ahead of them. And that's why I think ultimately when Purdue and Kentucky match up, I think you want to take Kentucky based on an easier road to get there. I think Kentucky's got an easier first round game against St. Peter's, who's been playing well, but I think this is a whole totally different level of team. And then playing in Indianapolis, pretty close to Lexington's a pretty nice advantage. And I just think Purdue might have a tougher second round game, though. I mean, I just said that I think Murray will give Kentucky a lot. So there's potentially some carnage that could happen in the bottom of the East bracket for sure. But I think I'll take Kentucky based on the easier potential setup to get there and the questions I have about Purdue in the past. I'll take UCLA over the St. Mary's winner, whoever that would be, St. Mary's, Indiana, Wyoming. I think anybody could come out of that one, which is another reason. And then at the top, I'll take Baylor to beat UNC, because I think UNC might struggle with potentially a Marquette press, and they're going to get through that first game. And I don't know that UNC is really on the same level as Baylor, who are missing a lot of players, but they do have the backcourt that's really strong, and the pressure defense that they still play on the perimeter, which I think might give UNC fits back-to-back games. You go from a press that Shaka runs just to a half-court high-intensity pressure from the Baylor guards. And that's, I think, what's made Scott Drew as talented or as successful as he's been in defending national champions, to get a little bit of credit. I do think that Baylor then playing UCLA in the next one, I'm going to take UCLA, because I think UCLA is stronger, deeper, and Baylor is potentially going to have a little bit more of a troublesome second-round matchup with UNC, and potentially could go out there or potentially Marquette, versus St. Mary's, Indiana, Wyoming, which I don't think will really give UCLA as much of a trouble. I also like the idea of being a differential play, because I'm not sure that a lot of people are going to take UCLA in that matchup, though I could be wrong, as I haven't really looked at bracket percentages just yet. So that'll make UCLA as my Elite Eight from the top end of the East. And then going to the bottom, I think it's up in the air, but I guess I have Kentucky getting through there at this point, Kentucky or Purdue. And I think I'll take UCLA to get through, as I clearly love the West Coast so far, with two West Coast teams making the Final Four. And since we're 23 minutes in already, I'm only halfway done and haven't even gone through the Final Four. I think I will leave the lines and stuff for tomorrow's stuff or whatever comes out, because I have some interest in the first four. Arizona then facing a 16 seed yet to be determined. Arizona, I think, looks great and shouldn't have too much trouble. TCU, I mentioned, is one of the worst teams in the bracket, are a 9 seed somehow against Seton Hall, who had a pretty disappointing year. But I think Seton Hall I'm very confident in moving on. We'll be looking to back them as a small favorite. I don't really know what TCU does besides getting a good win against a Texas team that's clearly flawed, and they're down 20 points. They're not going to come back against Seton Hall in that situation, I don't think. It's really just Mike Miles on his own. So to me, that's not enough. Moving on to Pittsburgh for Houston and UAB, also Illinois and University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. That's going to be a wild pod. If I was in Pittsburgh, I'd be going that one for sure. I think UAB is really strong. I mean, had to fight their way through the CUSA to get to this bracket, but they Andy Kennedy, I mean, say what you want about him, but he can pressure, he can do a lot of things. And I gotta say, he's got a team that I think could mess with Houston, who lost a lot of their ball handlers and a lot of their talented backcourt. Houston's still going to probably kill them on the glass, but UAB does have some high major transfers like Jemison and as a center from Clemson, who never really got a ton of playing time, but overall looks pretty decent. And then KJ Buffin's a really tough, take it to the hole type of guy. And I don't know. I see some danger there for Houston, who I think everyone's going to be picking. Again, I don't know that it's worth it to take UAB to win, but ultimately we can see. Illinois then facing Chattanooga. Chattanooga with a miracle buzzer beater to win to get through. And they're going to have real trouble despite having some quality big men. I mean, DeSosa, the transfer from Kansas after getting suspended for like 2 straight years. He's going to be an awesome interior player, but I don't know if he's enough to slow down Kofi Coburn, who is so big and so much bigger than everyone. I mean, Chattanooga has 3 bodies inside to potentially foul out against Kofi and throw them all in there. But I don't know that you want to keep fouling him because he's done okay, I think, at the line this year. And the worst part is Illinois, they have shooters to surround Kofi Coburn. They're not great, and they're not really that trustworthy, I don't think. But I just don't know that, like, and Malachi Smith from Chattanooga, plus they're kind of weaker perimeter players that don't really make a lot of 3-point shots despite having a lot of open ones. That's they're going to have to go in to knock out Illinois. So I just don't know that that'll happen. And I don't think there's enough bang for your buck unless you're getting 13 points for taking Chattanooga to win. So I'll probably be picking Illinois, but not really that confident in either of those. And I think that limits how far I can take either Houston or Illinois. But they're going to run into Arizona anyway, so I'm not so worried about that. Colorado State then, as another bizarre seeding, Mountain West, just got a lot of respect. I mean, I think they deserve some of it, and I've been talking about it on my podcast all season long, but this was like way overboard. Michigan is 11 seed, as Jekyll and Hyde as you can be, and probably would be better without Juwan Howard on the sideline, but ultimately, I don't know how CSU can slow down Hunter Dickinson. So I will be taking Michigan to get through that game, though I expect a lot of people will be doing that as well. Next, Tennessee and Longwood. Tennessee got probably the worst seed possible as a 3, deserved a lot higher for sure. In Indianapolis, not too far from Knoxville, I guess, but you're just grasping at straws, trying to find good reasons that they didn't get screwed. Longwood, I don't think can compete here. Tennessee's defense is too good. And I think Tennessee will get through Michigan as well, or CSU, whoever wins that one, that's a really, really weak matchup. Next, going to Pittsburgh, we have Ohio State and Loyola Chicago. Loyola is probably going to be picked a lot because based on their success in the tournament, though a lot has changed. They have a very, very young head coach. They don't have Cameron Krutwig, who is really their difference maker. And they were a 4 seed in the Missouri Valley. Say what you want about that, with certainly COVID cancellations, all that sort of stuff. But they do catch Ohio State, who's been playing really, really poorly and has been dealing with a ton of injured bodies. And I don't know who's going to be available for this one because Zed Key has a bad ankle. Liddell missed some time with, I guess, flu stuff, and not COVID, apparently. I don't know. Kyle Young's had a concussion and some symptoms with that. So you do want to face teams that have built good resumes with a very different roster. And Ohio State might be one of them. But I just feel like Ohio State's better. So it's going to be hard for me to want to take Loyola unless Ohio State has a really ugly injury report. Problem is that these guys are going to try to go for this tournament. They don't really know what's going to happen. If they come out earlier, they're really not effective. You might feel pretty gross having Ohio State picking them in the bracket. Villanova and Delaware, interesting enough because Delaware seems to feast on Villanova transfers. Don't see a lot of challenge there. And then ultimately, just because I think Ohio State and Loyola Chicago is a pretty good toss-up, I think Villanova will get through both of those, and then they'll run into Tennessee, which is going to be a great matchup. I think based on ease of getting through, Villanova potentially has a tougher second round game, I think, despite the seeds being worse than Colorado State and Michigan. But that's based on kind of my interest in Tennessee and thinking their defense is good enough. And if they make shots, they can beat anybody. When I see Tennessee Villanova, so there's no real disqualifying factor based on a really tough second round game. And the game's going to be in San Antonio. There should be good fan support for both of the teams. So I don't see a huge difference there. But I got to say, I mean, Villanova, I mean, both coming off winning their conference tournaments, so both are playing as well as they could be. Villanova did kind of have to sneak through the UConn game in the semis, but um, I think from what I've seen with Tennessee this year, I think if there's a 2 versus 3, most people are probably taking the 2. So I'm interested in backing Tennessee here because I think that from where they sit, the defense they play is a lot better than Villanova's. Both are going to rely on shooting. And if Villanova's shooting doesn't go the way they need it to, they could lose big time. I think Tennessee is probably a more likely, or they have a higher floor than the Villanova ceiling. I think is higher, but the floor I think is lower, and that's a good sign for Tennessee. Moving to the top of the bracket, I think I'll take, based on the easier first round matchup, I think I'll take Illinois to get through. Plus, they're a lot healthier with a lot deeper of a backcourt. And I don't know that Houston would have as much of an offensive rebounding advantage against a team that has Kofi Cockburn in there. But that's certainly not something I feel very good about. And I do feel good about Arizona getting through Seton Hall or TCU if they somehow miraculously come back from 20 behind to win. So I think Arizona's got a pretty clear path so far. And then I think from Arizona facing a Villanova Tennessee winner, based on Arizona's easy run, I'm going to take them to move on to the Final Four. Not really sure if Tennessee or Villanova who will win that matchup, and I think it's been a lot easier route to get there as well. So moving down to the last but not least, the Midwest, as we're 30 minutes in already. Kansas should get through in Fort Worth, whoever they get, the 16 seed. San Diego State and Creighton. Creighton has been outperforming expectations, certainly. I mean, the big win against Providence was, I think, most noteworthy based on the size of the victory or the spread or discrepancy on the scoreboard gap, maybe. San Diego State, I mean, they did what they needed to do, got all the way to the final of the Mountain West. No idea how they're an 8 seed because they were basically a bubble team very recently. And really all they did was beat Colorado State. But whatever. They're going to play really good defense. It's going to make it really hard on Creighton to score. I don't see Creighton being good enough to score a bunch of points, rake 3-pointers. I don't think Creighton's very good. And San Diego State is going to make it really hard on them. Plus, they have Matt Bradley, the best scorer on the floor. So I will take San Diego State there. And then likely not any further because I don't think that they can score with Kansas. So Kansas then will be in my Sweet 16. Iowa and Richmond. The Richmond Cinderella story was great. I mean, some big comebacks against Dayton and against Davidson in the final to get in this tournament, and might have saved Chris Mooney's job. I mean, this team was better than they've performed over the last couple seasons and should have been in this tournament as an at-large, I think. But they wouldn't have been if they didn't win the tournament yesterday. Iowa, meanwhile, is playing better than anybody. 5 seeds based on tough Big Ten and getting beat up maybe and losing some games they shouldn't have earlier in the year. But their offense is really good, and they've found a way to basically play without a big guy with the 2 Murray brothers playing together. And that made their really weak interior now a strength on the offensive end, and they're always good offensively. And they got a really nice draw in Buffalo with Providence and South Dakota State. And I feel like Providence is just, I mean, everyone said it all season. They've been so fortunate to be where they are. Getting a 4 seed is incredible. And maybe they'll get a tournament win, but usually the ceiling for Providence is to get 1 tournament win. And a lot of times it doesn't happen. South Dakota State, what they want to do is shoot a lot of threes, and they want to play one-on-one in the post if they can't get open threes. But they're not the take you to the rim type. They're going to make Nate Watson try to guard and be an interior defender that's more on the perimeter, I guess, not away from take them as far away from the basket as possible, and then line their shooters up on the perimeter. So Providence certainly should win this game, but I don't really see them doing it. I don't think that they're very good. They've been really fortunate with a lot of COVID absences, injuries, all that sort of stuff, and their opponents when they've played this season. Credit them for a great season. Winning the Big East is awesome, but getting massacred by 30 or something like that to Creighton as a 3-point favorite in the second round is pretty bad. I got to say, having to go to overtime, I think with Butler, if I remember correctly, not great. Put it that way. And I think that'll only make the Iowa run that much easier, which then makes me in Chicago of all places. I mean, there are plenty of Kansas fans for sure. Iowa's going to be really there as well. And I think most people are rooting for the underdog if you don't have a dog in the fight. So Iowa might be a very live underdog for sure, but also a team that could potentially knock out Kansas and get to the Elite Eight and might be the first 1 seed going out. Potentially, I guess, depending on when UCLA would play Baylor, I guess, based on this podcast so far. Moving to Milwaukee, which is relevant here for LSU, Iowa State, not necessarily for that one, but definitely the second one for Wisconsin and Colgate. Wisconsin playing Milwaukee is such a gift. Colgate, I think, can give them some trouble though. I don't really fear the Wisconsin interior. They do have two interior scorers who I think can cause some problems, and they launch threes. And if they go in, that's a really scary team to play. Good posts with 3-point shooters. Wisconsin should win that game in Milwaukee, should be enough. But the line's a little lower than I expected right now. I think it was 7.5 last night. That's usually, I think, a standard line. They don't get a lot higher in the first round for some of the potential upset picks, but usually a 14 seed's not getting that much respect, especially not at a near home event. Circling back to LSU, Iowa State, I mean, a lot of stuff in the air with LSU missing their coach, though they did pretty well, I thought, without Will Wade when he got suspended maybe 2 seasons ago. Iowa State really is just a defensive pressure the ball as much as you can. And if they can make 3-pointers, they look pretty good. I don't really trust them to do that. I think LSU's defense is better, and that's what Iowa State usually does better than their opponent. LSU's got plenty of issues with drama surrounding the program, but I don't really think that's affecting the players too much. I'm probably taking LSU as a 6 seed. I don't really see a reason to take Iowa State, I got to say. And then the only question is the next matchup in that same pod in Milwaukee, round of 32, when Wisconsin likely gets through. But if they don't, then whoever wins that Iowa State LSU game is probably a really good pick to get through Colgate as well. I think Wisconsin is probably the chalk pick that you got to go with because they're playing Milwaukee. But I think they are a flawed team that really wants to win games 52-50, as I said with another one earlier, St. Mary's, I think. And that's not a great setup for trying to win multiple tournament games, especially because they were picked 8th in the Big Ten preseason. So like they grossly overperformed, and we'll see if that actually is true on how good they are, if maybe the Big Ten is a little weaker than a lot of people are expecting. The bottom pod in Greenville is USC in Miami and Auburn and Jacksonville State. I do think Jacksonville State is pretty good. They've got, I think Brandon Huffman's still there, a transfer from UNC, who was in that, put up decent numbers when he was able to play back in the day for Carolina. But and Auburn's really been struggling. They've been on a downward trajectory for months now. And as a 2 seed, they got some good wins, and good thing they got up to number 1 in the nation, but that seems pretty overseeded in my opinion. I feel like Tennessee should have had that one. But ultimately USC and Miami, the other game, Miami getting to where they are is incredible. 10 seed at large bid, considering they really just pressured teams the whole time and escaped some miraculous situations like Syracuse and Virginia Tech. They might have lost that one. Anyway, they stole some games at the end, had some half court buzzer beaters to win stuff. Like, I feel like they're really, really fortunate. I will admit I do have a USC future, and I'm very interested in them. I love their draw. I feel like their height's going to be a big, big problem for Miami. I don't think Waterberg can do anything on the perimeter to counteract his weaknesses or struggles on rebounding, which will then I think force Miami and Coach L to send a lot more guys to the defensive glass and basically limit fast break opportunities. I don't see a lot of opportunities for Miami to score here unless they shoot really well, which is not really what they've done all season. So I'm pretty confident in USC, and I got to say, going to be hard for me not to pick them to beat Auburn as well, because I think Auburn, with Smith, the potential number 1 or 2 pick in the draft, they're great, and he's awesome. But Auburn wants to run and play the fastest game possible. USC is not going to allow that, I don't think. And their size is going to be a real problem for a lot of teams, especially a team like Auburn that wants to shoot over them. And they're going to be taking bad shots from further away. That's not a great combination, I don't think, for a matchup in Greenville, which should have a fair amount of Auburn fans. And USC doesn't really travel well, I don't think. But even then, I think USC against the spread will be very interesting to me, though it might be a lower spread than a lot of people would expect. But I guess if you want to argue that Auburn gets through because of their easier first-round matchup and maybe Miami gets through USC and that kind of throws or topples the whole house, I don't know. I don't love that, and I think I can't take Auburn to go too much further. Though if they do get through USC, playing Wisconsin in Chicago, would be a lot of Wisconsin fans there, but not as scary, I got to say. So the bottom of that is ripe for a big upset. And I think USC might be the team that I'm picking because I just don't think that Wisconsin nor Auburn are really strong to really represent, or, I mean, who knows? There could be a deep run, maybe LSU. Ewing theory without their coach goes on a run, but probably is unlikely. So I think this is primed and ready, looking pretty good for USC, though I'm clearly biased. So I'll move along from there. So let's just say Auburn gets through, and they'll get through Wisconsin based on athleticism advantage, and Wisconsin not being able to score with them. Though we'll think about that if that matchup actually happens in Chicago. I do think Iowa gets through whoever gets through the bottom. So, man, I didn't have this initially in the bracket I put together, but I could see Iowa making a deep run. It's tough because they were a good seed last year and didn't perform, but ultimately Oregon does that to teams, and this team seems to be they're a lot more versatile and don't rely on a big man who's 6'11" to be in the post where they give away, or they let you get away with so much contact in this tournament. So if I remember correctly, my final four, what I'm doing live, is Arizona, in New Orleans, Arizona, Iowa, UCLA, and Gonzaga, which is wild. But I do think the numbered seeds here that aren't ones have a shot. Iowa's been playing so well, but I don't know how they match up with Arizona, who won at Illinois in a really great performance earlier in the year. And I think played in a relatively poor Pac-12, but ultimately I think did enough and beat the good teams. So I think Arizona will get through that one. And I think Gonzaga, UCLA is a big question. I mean, it was so close last year. Would look to UCLA against the spread. But I do worry about how Miles Johnson would be guarding Drew Timme. He's so efficient as a scorer. I just don't know exactly how that would work. UCLA will probably try to grind it to a halt with Mick Cronin. And that's what he does. And it worked fairly well last year in getting them to the Final Four. I think they could see them doing it again. Ultimately, I'd like UCLA against the spread, but I think I'd pick Gonzaga to win that game based on the pool, where at that point you want to make sure, because I don't think many people would have UCLA get in the championship game. It's a big number to overcome if the title game's worth 32 points and it's basically divided by 2 every game from there all the way back to the start. But I don't think UCLA getting to a final would win you a bracket, but it certainly put you in a good position, as I don't think a lot of people would have that. But ultimately, I think Gonzaga is more likely to win that game and would at least get you to the finals with a team that most people are picking. So that's my head-to-head matchup, Gonzaga, Arizona. And I think I'll take Arizona in that one, as I think they've been playing well. Certainly some concerns with point guard and Kirk Krisa's injury, but I think he'll be okay, or whatever. Kirk Krisa, I think is his name. It throws me off when the non-Americans have different last names in their back than their given names or whatever, but whatever. Soccer is even worse. But I think Arizona's got the size to really bother Gonzaga, which Gonzaga doesn't run into a lot. And I got to say, taking all the way Gonzaga all the way to the final, I didn't think I would do that based on who they are. And I feel like they're a much inferior team to what they were last year. But they've got an easy run. And that's what big thing when you're filling out a bracket is you want to back the teams that don't have a lot of challengers coming through, and Arizona and Gonzaga, I think, are those two teams. And surprise, surprise, they're in my finals with Arizona winning it. And I'll give you 76-72 because I think it'd be pretty high scoring because Gonzaga always does that. But title games are never really that high scoring. So 76-72 Arizona, my final. Feel free if you want to invite me to anything or head-to-heads or whatever. Anybody want to do a contest, hit me up, @thereal_G Warner. There's 43 minutes. Hope you enjoyed it, and let's go make some money.